Hello and welcome everybody to another edition of the Saturdays for the Byzantines podcast. Today, bringing you one of our short midweek episodes. I do apologize for not being able to bring out an episode at the weekend. It's past Easter weekend. Just, as hoping, I had hoped that I would be able to manage my time a little better to put out an episode, but spending time with the family and all that, time got away from me, and so I haven't had time to prep anything. So I'm looking to, get you guys some content here in during this week. Try to put out a couple different bits here. So today, what I wanted to do is respond to a comment that we received a couple days ago. This was on the Why No Love for Byzantium video. And this is from J Uno. Says, "Hey man, I just wanted to say I really enjoyed the channel. Thank you very much. I was wondering if you had any knowledge of scholarship available on Hellenistic paganism between the 5th and the 10th centuries. History says that Theodosius I officially put an end to it, but my gut tells me that was written more for propaganda purposes. Thousands of years of polytheistic / mysterious religious practices simply cannot have ended because a brute tore down a few temples. It's difficult to track down reliable information on how this subject, it is difficult to track down reliable information on how the subject, the decline of paganism, occurred. What do you think happened? Did worship go underground and slowly perish due to declining literacy, or was that the intelligentsia who had previously embraced philosophy and polytheism were forced to publicly proclaim themselves Christians? That aspect of late antiquity into the Middle Ages is the most frustrating thing. I just don't understand why our polytheistic roots were eradicated in such a systematic fashion." So it's a long comment, but I'm going to try to respond to a few of these things and then give an example from Procopius of something kind of like this going on that I thought was sort of interesting, which I read this after I got this comment, and I thought it would be an interesting way to tie it into a video. So Theodosius I, in terms of Roman emperors, is one of the first. Previous emperors had been essentially more tolerant of paganism, promoting Christianity, certainly being tolerant of Christianity, while still perhaps making some disadvantages for paganism, but not as being quite as harsh towards it as Theodosius I was. That's certainly the case. And before him, you had Julian the Apostate, who actually attempted to bring the Romans back to paganism, which he was not successful in doing, in no small part because of his disastrous campaign against the Persians. But let's see. Moving on through your question here. It is unlikely that just overnight polytheistic practices would have gone away. Simply, as you say, they're practiced for thousands of years. But by the time of Theodosius, Christianity had, since the Edict of Milan, had really had an explosion during the 4th century due to the toleration from the Edict of Milan, and also due to the fact that polytheism did not have the same kind of zeal that Christianity had at this point in time. At that point in time, there's especially a missionary zeal among Christians to spread the Christian faith that was just not around with pagans at that point in time. It is difficult to track down reliable information about this. To my knowledge, there is not a lot of information about the subject at this point in time. I mean, you do have, for example, the historian Ammianus Marcellinus, who is a big source for a lot of Roman conflict with the barbarian invaders, but that is earlier in this time period. Ammianus Marcellinus was a pagan, but he was pretty tolerant of Christianity. It says that he did not criticize a lot of Christians simply for Christianity when he criticizes them in his works. Um, but you do have, he's a pretty notable figure who is a pagan, fairly close to this point in time. Now, in terms of what do I think happened? Well, the way Christianity really spreads during this time, and initially in the start, I would say your comment about was like the intelligentsia or the upper classes kind of forced to provide lip service to this. I think the answer is no. The reason being for this is that I don't think the intelligentsia or the nobility were really forced into this, especially not by the emperors. A lot of the nobility convert to Christianity, especially because you have a lot of noble upper class women who are converting to Christianity especially because Christianity treats women more equally than they were previously under Roman paganism, right? You no longer have things like the paterfamilias, which is for those of you who don't know, the paterfamilias is the idea that a man has total control over his family to the point where a man actually has the authority to kill his wife. In Christianity, that is not allowed. As well as things like the consent of a woman is more emphasized in Christianity when it comes to marriages than it was under paganism. So women were a lot of the driving force behind early conversions to Christianity. And then what ends up happening is they convert. A woman converts to Christianity, and then she gets her husband to convert. Then they have Christian children, and then it just kind of goes on from there. And as well, you also get with lower classes as well, like slaves. Christianity is appealing to slaves because it offers them a certain dignity which they did not previously have as slaves. And actually, a number of early popes were freed slaves. I believe the second pope was a guy named Linus. And he was a slave, was freed, and became pope, I believe, after Peter. And I'm trying to see if I have anything else to say about your comment here, Jay Uno. Thank you for the comment. By the way, it is an interesting topic. I do think there was probably some degree of paganism going underground, and another part of the reason why you're not going to have a lot of scholarship or even written sources about this is because if you're practicing underground, you don't want to write about that because you're providing like a paper trail of the thing that you're doing, which you're not supposed to be. This is why, for example, with Christianity in the early centuries, like in the first and second century, we don't have a lot of, or we don't have as much written history from those time periods because Christianity is illegal. It's being persecuted, and not a lot of people are going to write about their Christian faith or their Christian practices because if someone finds that writing, then you're going to be in big trouble. I think the same thing probably happens as the centuries go on with paganism, right? It's going to go, like you said, it goes underground, and because of that, there's not going to be a whole lot of written sourcing about it, just because it puts you at risk. The same, like I said, same way that you do not have as much writing from Christians about Christianity in the early centuries of the church, like especially the first century. I mean, obviously there's the Gospels and St. Paul, but all of those guys were martyred, and so that is certainly going to dissuade a lot of people from partaking in this venture. One thing I wanted to point out, though, I was reading here Procopius, obviously, because this is what we're reading about for our Justinian little mini series here, and there's an interesting part in here. So where we left off earlier, Belisarius had just taken Naples, and what's going to happen is he's going to march up to Rome, and actually the Ostrogothic general in Rome is actually going to chicken out and leave Rome with his army, and Belisarius is going to march in and take Rome without a fight. But then what's going to happen is a different Gothic commander, I believe his name is Vitiges, he's going to spend a lot of time trying to take Rome back. And so a lot of what we're going to be talking about here in the future is going to be about Belisarius defending Rome from these Gothic counterattacks. And there's an interesting part in here about what some Romans are doing with a particular pagan temple here during the sieges, because people are getting a little antsy. The Goths have a large army. Belisarius is left with only about 5,000 men after he has to leave garrisons behind in all of the cities that he's taken previously. So when he's in Rome, he's only got, Procopius tells us it's about 5,000 men. But Procopius also tells us he's fighting like 150,000 Goths, which is certainly not true. So you do have to ask, is he also exaggerating about how few soldiers Belisarius has to say, oh, he's such a great general that he had 5,000 men and fended off 150,000. But either way, I mean, he's significantly outnumbered. And so people in Rome are getting antsy and perhaps a little desperate, to the point where it says, now this is from book 5 of Procopius's The Wars of Justinian, chapter 25, verse 18. At that time, some of the Romans attempted to secretly force open the doors of the temple of Janus. Now, Janus was a Roman pagan god of like transitions, like kind of, it says like the transition between life and death, youth and adulthood, that sort of thing. And so it seemingly they would keep the doors of the Temple of Janus open during times of war back in the pagan days. This Janus was the first among the ancient gods whom the Romans called in their own tongue Penates. He had his temple in the Forum, and in front of the Senate House, that is just above the Tria Fata, for so the Romans called the Fates. The temple is entirely of bronze and square form, but it is only large enough to cover the statue of Janus. So this is not a very big thing. It's a statue with a surrounding casing, basically. The statue is bronze and no less than 5 cubits. Just skipping ahead here to the part that's actually interesting. There are bronze doors fronting each face, which the Romans in ancient times were accustomed to close in times of peace and prosperity, and to open when they had war. But when the Romans came to honor, as truly as any others, the teachings of the Christians, then they would no longer open the doors, even when they were at war. During this siege, however, some, I suppose, who had in mind the old beliefs, attempted secretly to open them, but did not succeed entirely. They moved the doors only so far that they did not close as tightly against one another as formerly. Those who attempted this escaped detection. No investigation of the act was made, as it happened in a time of great confusion, given that it did not become known to the officers, nor did it reach the ears of the populace, except a very few. So you have here, right, an example of, even though by this point, especially in Rome, most people are going to be Christians, but you do have this sort of a hangover of paganism still around. People in the city of Rome are kind of feeling the heat, so to speak, in terms of the siege of the Goths, and try to open the doors of the Temple of Janus, because that was what the Romans had done in pagan times during wartime, presumably as a desperate attempt to appease the old gods for help in the war, which is interesting. Another point I want to make here before we finish up here is that if you go back and watch our episode on Augustine, on Augustine, City of God, and who was St. Augustine. St. Augustine writes City of God in response to pagan criticisms that Rome, because they became Christian, now that that's the reason that that was specifically in response to the 410 sack of Rome by the Visigoths. And Augustine is writing that book in response to pagan criticisms following that event. So there's still pagan by 410. You still have enough pagans around that Augustine considers it worth his time to write a rebuttal to them. Now, who exactly they were, I would have to read City of God again, but I don't know if anyone's named specifically in that. But you could, if you want, you could read that and see if he mentions anybody by name. Because our friend Jay Uno also asked if I could refer him to any kind of scholarship on this. I would say perhaps if anyone's mentioned in there, you could try looking into them and see about that. But like I said, in terms of scholarship on this and in terms of primary sourcing on this, there's not a whole lot. He asked specifically about between the 5th and the 10th century Hellenistic paganism. And I'm glad he said Hellenistic and not Hellenic. That shows he knows what he's talking about here, the distinction between classical Greek and more of the late antique Hellenistic society that we would be talking about here. So thanks for the comment, and I thought it would make a decent idea for a video. So if you've made it this far in the video, please make sure to give us a like, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and hit the notification bell so you never miss another episode. We are also on Apple Podcast and Google Play, so give us a follow there as well, and also a 5-star review. You can check out our Instagram and Facebook page, both Professor Wren, where I post updates about the show and other fun bits of content. I posted something about possibly doing a series on the Normans in the future. I think I've talked about that before, but I think it would be a fun topic to go over. And so with that, that's all the time I have for today, and we'll see y'all next time.